At our anniversary dinner, my boyfriend looked me dead in the eye and said, "When are you finally gonna lose weight?" His friends went dead silent. I whispered, "Can we talk later?" But he poured wine on my head and laughed, so I quietly said, "You have no idea who you just messed with." I was still wiping the wine out of my eyes when I realized nobody at the table was going to step in. Not one of his friends. Not the couples we'd come with. Not even the server who froze a few feet away, holding a tray like she wasn't sure if she should call security or pretend this wasn't happening. All I could hear was the wet drip of Cabernet sliding down my dress and the blood pounding in my ears. We were at a place called the Whitmore in downtown Raleigh, a spot he picked because he said it was classy enough to prove he was trying. We were supposed to be celebrating our one-year anniversary. But the look on his face, flat, cold, almost bored, told me this dinner had nothing to do with celebrating anything. "Jesus, look at you," he said, loud enough that the neighboring table turned. "You can't even control yourself." I stared at him, clutching the napkin in my hand like it was a lifeline. My hair was dripping red. My mascara was already running. And he just leaned back in his chair like I was some performance he'd grown tired of. His best friend Tyler let out this low whistle, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing, and then suddenly he laughed. And that was all it took, one laugh. It spread around the table like a spark catching dry brush. A few unsure snickers, then full-on laughter from two of the girls. I felt humiliated in a way that didn't even feel real yet. Like my brain was lagging behind the moment. Like maybe I'd wake up any second and this would be some anxiety dream. But he was still staring at me, waiting, almost daring me to react. My throat tightened. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. My voice came out quiet, thin, like it wasn't even mine. He rolled his eyes. "Because someone had to say it. You don't listen. You think I'm supposed to just sit here and watch you let yourself go. I'm not your dad. I'm your boyfriend." A couple at another table stood up to leave. They didn't even bother hiding the disgust on their faces as they passed. A server started walking toward us, then seemed to change her mind when she made eye contact with him. He had that way of looking at people like they were beneath him. It always worked. "Get up," he said to me. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene." That was the moment something in my chest cracked, not a break, a shift, a slow, grinding rearranging of everything I thought I knew about him and about myself. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My legs were shaky. My hands were trembling so badly the napkin fell to the floor. The room felt too bright, too sharp, like every person was watching me walk away. But as I reached the entrance, I stopped. I don't know what made me turn back. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was survival. He was already laughing with his friends again, waving off the moment like it was nothing. Like I wasn't worth the breath it took to humiliate me. He didn't know what had been happening behind the scenes. He didn't know the private messages I found. He didn't know what I'd learned just 2 nights before. He didn't know that tonight was supposed to be my moment, my confrontation, my line in the sand. He didn't know that the weight I'd gained wasn't from overeating or letting myself go. It was from the one secret he never thought I'd uncover. And from the doorway, soaked in wine, shaking with fury I hadn't let myself feel until that second, I made a choice. He wasn't going to see me break. He was going to see me destroy him. I didn't tell anyone this, not my sister in Charlotte, not my closest coworker Maya, not even the therapist I'd been forcing myself to see twice a month. But the truth is the 15 pounds he humiliated me over didn't come from nowhere. They came from stress I couldn't name yet, from nights I couldn't sleep, from a feeling I couldn't shake that something inside my relationship had already started rotting months before that dinner. The first fracture happened in late spring, maybe April. We'd been dating 10 months. Things felt off. He'd always been particular, control made him comfortable, but he used to wrap that controlling edge in charm. Back then, I mistook it for confidence. I didn't realize control and confidence can be mirror images depending on who's holding them. He started criticizing small things first, but it was subtle enough that I kept questioning if I was the problem. Then came the money stuff weeks when he'd mysteriously forget his wallet or ask me to cover something because my bank's being weird. That part didn't raise flags at first. I had a savings cushion. I figured he'd pay me back when he remembered. But in June, a coworker sent me a screenshot from someone's Instagram story. It was his ex, Hannah, the one he'd just compared me to at the table. She'd put up a photo of 2 glasses of wine and a man's hand with the caption, "Some habits die hard." The hand looked like his, the watch definitely was. When I showed him the photo, he barely blinked. He said, "Do you really think she'd want me back?" Then he laughed. Actually laughed at me. That was the first night I felt something small inside me detach. A week later, while he was in the shower at my apartment, his phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, I don't touch people's phones. I've never been that person. But the preview lit up and there it was. "You still haven't told her." From a number with no name saved. I opened it. I don't even remember the sensation in my hands when I typed in his passcode. It was like muscle memory, like I knew it without ever having been told. Maybe he had said it once. Maybe I had seen it over his shoulder. Maybe I'd been paying attention longer than I realized. The messages weren't just from Hannah. They were from two others. One of them sending photos. One asking him when he was going to break up with me like he promised. One asking if he'd gotten the money from me yet. That line made my stomach drop. I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to myself from his phone. Then I deleted the outgoing email from his sent folder. I closed everything and placed the phone exactly where it had been. For 2 days after that, I couldn't eat. I couldn't think straight. The weight gain he mocked me for wasn't even real yet then, back in summer, it was the opposite. I lost 5 pounds from anxiety. But after those 2 days passed, something else happened. I stopped being shocked. I stopped defending him in my head. I started planning questions, rehearsing what I wanted to ask him. I wanted to confront him, calmly, clearly, directly. But he never gave me the chance. He kept dodging my invitations to talk. He kept acting like everything was fine. And then 2 nights before our anniversary, another crack split open, bigger than the rest. Because that was when I learned what the money actually was. And that was the moment my anger stopped being soft. It became sharp. 2 nights before the anniversary dinner, I was sitting at my kitchen table in my Raleigh apartment, staring at my bank app like it could explain itself. I'd logged in because I kept feeling like something wasn't adding up. I wasn't shopping more. I wasn't eating out more. But the balance kept dipping lower than it should have. There it was, 3 transfers I didn't recognize. Small ones at first. $120, $85. Then one for $600. All of them sent to a digital wallet under a name I didn't know. Except I did know it. Not at first glance. But when I cross-checked it with the names in his messages, the pieces slammed together so fast I felt physically sick. It belonged to one of the women he'd been texting. The one who'd asked, "Did you get the money from her yet?" He'd used my saved card. My card that I'd let him use once when we ordered takeout, thinking nothing of it, to send her money. My money, and the transfers were labeled in a way that told me he'd planned for me not to notice. Utilities, supplies, shared. I remember standing up from the table slowly, like the room had tilted. It wasn't the betrayal of the cheating that broke me then. It wasn't even the humiliation of funding whatever he was doing with her. It was the dawning realization that he didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as a resource. A wallet with legs. I sat there for an hour, just breathing, trying to decide what the hell to do. The version of me from 8 months ago would have confronted him right away. Would have cried. Would have said, "How could you?" And waited for him to explain it all away with charm and that voice he used when he wanted me tame, soft, apologetic, fake sincere. But I wasn't that version anymore. I was tired. I was angry. And I'd started to notice how good anger felt when I let it sit in my bones instead of dissolving it in excuses. So I started documenting everything. Screenshots, bank statements, timestamps. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I needed proof. Real proof. The kind of proof he couldn't manipulate or talk around. The next day, I moved differently around him. Quieter, controlled, watching. He noticed, but not enough to care. He never cared about anything he didn't think he could use. He texted me mid-morning, "Anniversary dinner tomorrow. Don't wear that black dress. It makes you look bigger." I stared at that message for a long time, not crying, not shaking. Just done, but then something unexpected happened. Something small, almost stupid, but it changed everything. At work in the hallway, Maya brushed past me on her way to a meeting. She barely glanced at me but said, "You look exhausted. Whatever's going on, you don't deserve it." It wasn't much. But it was the first time in weeks someone had looked at me and seen something true. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and made myself look at my reflection. The dark circles, the stress weight, the dullness in my eyes, not disgust, just honesty. and honesty cracked something open in me. I didn't want to fix myself for him. I didn't want to make myself small so he'd stop hurting me. I wanted to understand how I'd let him carve pieces out of me without noticing. I wanted to rebuild myself, not to win him back, but to be someone I recognized again. So I made a decision. Simple, but it felt like stepping onto a new road. I would go to that anniversary dinner. I would watch. I would listen. I would let him expose himself. And then I would break him with the truth. What I didn't know was that the truth wasn't done unfolding. There was a twist coming, one I never saw coming, that would change everything I thought I understood about him and about what I was really fighting against. I didn't sleep the night before the anniversary dinner. Not from fear. Fear had burned off days ago. It was something else keeping me awake, something sharper. A sense that I was circling a truth I hadn't actually touched yet. The next evening, when I walked into the Whitmore and saw him already surrounded by his friends, laughing, drinking, acting like a man with nothing to hide, the feeling got stronger. He stood up to hug me, but I stepped back. I saw the irritation flicker across his face before he smoothed it over. We made it through maybe 10 minutes, small talk, clinking glasses, fake smiles, before everything detonated. The insults, the comparison to his ex, the public humiliation, the wine soaking me down to my skin. But what I didn't say in the moment, what I couldn't say, was that just before he poured the wine on me, right when I asked, "Why are you doing this?" I saw something change in his eyes. It wasn't drunkenness. It wasn't anger. It was panic, a flicker, a tightening. Like he realized I knew something he hadn't accounted for, and that expression wouldn't make sense until later. After I walked out of the restaurant, I went straight to my car in the parking garage and locked the doors. I sat there, soaked, heart hammering, trying to breathe. I wanted to drive home, wash the wine out of my hair, crawl into bed and disappear. But I couldn't. Something in me refused to leave it unfinished. So I started the engine, but instead of heading home, I drove 10 minutes across Raleigh to his apartment. I knew he wasn't there. He'd be at dinner for another hour, probably bragging about what he'd just done like it made him a hero. I still had a spare key, one he'd probably forgotten about because he rarely invited me over anymore. When I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not cologne, not laundry detergent, something chemical, sharp. I followed it to his bedroom. His closet door was slightly open. I don't know what made me slide it wider, but when I did, everything inside me froze. On the floor, pushed behind a stack of shoeboxes, was a duffel bag, not the gym bag he always carried. A different one. Older, dirt on the bottom. A small tear on one side. I unzipped it. Cash, stacks of it, rubber banded, shoved in carelessly. And under the cash, papers, not love notes, not photos, not anything you'd expect someone to hide. They were loan statements, collections notices, bank records from an account he'd closed years ago, all of them with numbers that didn't make sense. Debt, tens of thousands of dollars in debt, most of it racked up after he and I started dating. There was more. A notebook with names, phone numbers, amounts. A list of people he owed, or people he'd taken from. Some entries were circled, some crossed out, some labeled with a single word that made cold sweat crawl down my spine. Recovered. I didn't understand at first, but then a pattern emerged. Every name with small amounts next to it, $200, $350, $600, belonged to women. And every one of those women had also appeared in his messages. He wasn't just cheating. He was running something, a scam, a cycle, a pattern of targeting women, dating them, draining them, dumping them, and moving on to the next one. The money he'd taken from me wasn't casual. It was intentional, calculated, and I wasn't the only one. My knees gave out and I sat on the floor, staring at the bag, realizing the scope of what I was really up against. The humiliation at the restaurant wasn't random cruelty. It was strategy. He hadn't been panicking because he felt guilty. He was panicking because he realized I had gotten too close to the thing he actually cared about, his pipeline, his income, his secrets, and now I was sitting in the middle of them. I sat on his bedroom floor with the duffel bag open beside me, the cash stacked like warped little monuments to every lie he'd ever told. The longer I stared at it, the more the humiliation at the Whitmore hardened into something cold and deliberate. Not rage, not even pain, purpose. I put everything back exactly the way I found it, same angles, same spacing, same careless mess he'd made. I didn't take $1, not yet. Stealing from him would have been easy, too easy. And I didn't want easy. I wanted irrefutable. When I got to my car, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the clarity that comes right before a plan forms. I drove home with the windows down, the cold air drying the wine in my hair, forcing me to stay alert. Every red light felt like a checkpoint, every turn sharpening the picture of what needed to happen next. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot, the plan was already there, fully formed. First step, secure my evidence. I spent 2 hours organizing everything: screenshots, bank statements, the photos I'd taken of the duffel bag, and the documents inside. I backed them up to cloud storage under an encrypted folder. Then I emailed a copy to myself and scheduled it to forward to Maya if I didn't cancel the send within 72 hours. Second step, understand his pattern. I deep dived into the women I'd seen in his messages. Social media profiles, comments he'd left months ago, the photos he'd secretly liked. It didn't take long to see the similarities in how he approached them: love bombing, financial, emergencies, sudden emotional distance, then reeling them back in when they tried to leave. It was a script, one he'd run over and over. I mapped the timeline out on a notepad until the pattern wasn't just visible, it was undeniable. Third step, decide how much I wanted to burn. That was the part that took the longest. I knew I had enough to expose him publicly, or privately, or legally. But every option came with a cost. And in the quiet of my apartment, with the wall clock ticking too loudly and the faint smell of wine still clinging to my skin, I had to face the real question. What kind of revenge was I willing to live with? At around 1 a.m., the answer came to me with the kind of certainty that settles low in your gut. Heavy, permanent, final. I didn't want to just ruin him. I wanted to collapse the entire structure he'd built. The lies, the money pipeline, the network of women he'd drained, the confidence he walked around with like armor, every part of it had to fall. Not with violence, not with chaos, with precision. Pretty soon, the only thing left of him would be the truth, and the people he hurt finally seeing it for what it was. But before I could strike, I had to test something. I needed to know if he'd noticed anything missing, if he sensed the shift, if he suspected me. So the next morning I texted him, we need to talk. Him, about what? If this is about last night, you embarrassed yourself. Me, come over tonight. Him, why? Me, you'll see. It took less than 10 seconds for him to respond. Him, fine. Short, clipped, almost irritated, but not wary, good. He didn't know what I'd seen. He didn't know what was coming. He still thought I was the same person he'd humiliated, drained, controlled. But I wasn't going into that confrontation alone. Not really. Because earlier, while gathering evidence, I'd found something buried in one of the message threads. Something that suggested his scam wasn't just romantic. It involved someone else. Someone he'd kept hidden. And when I realized who it was, the entire plan shifted. My revenge would still happen, the precision, the exposure, the collapse. But now there was a new threat in the shadows. A second variable. A second enemy. And dealing with him meant facing the person whose existence changed everything I thought I knew about the danger I was in. He showed up at my apartment the next evening like nothing had happened. Clean shirt, cologne heavy enough to choke, that smug, steady walk he used when he wanted people to think he was in control. But when I opened the door, the first thing he did wasn't look at me. He scanned the room, not subtly, not naturally. His eyes moved wall to wall like he was checking for something he'd left behind, or something someone else might see. For a second, I wondered if he somehow knew I'd been in his apartment. But then his gaze stopped on my coffee table, where I'd placed nothing except 2 glasses of water. No laptop, no papers, nothing to hint at what I'd uncovered. Still, he kept staring, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw it plainly: fear, not the quick flicker I'd caught at the restaurant, something deeper, older, heavy enough that he tried to swallow it down before looking at me. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked. His tone wasn't arrogant this time, it was forced. That's when I knew this wasn't just about the money, or the cheating, or the bag full of cash he thought I'd never find. There was something bigger underneath it. I gestured for him to sit. He didn't. He stayed standing, arms crossed, as if sitting would make him vulnerable. "Say whatever you're going to say," he snapped. "I've got things to handle later." "Like who?" I asked quietly. "Hannah or the others?" His jaw clicked. That tiny, involuntary tightening. If I hadn't already studied every one of his tells, I might have missed it. You're paranoid, he said. Then you won't mind explaining the money you took from me. His face drained so fast I felt the temperature in the room change. And the transfers to her, his breathing hitched. And the notebook, I added softly, that was it. The moment he broke. His shoulders dropped a fraction, and he didn't bother hiding the anger sliding across his face. You went through my things, he said, not shocked, accusatory. You stole from me, I said. He started to step closer, but then something stopped him, an internal tug-of-war. He took a breath, forced calm into his voice, and said, You don't know what you're talking about. I know you've been using women to pay off debts. I don't have debts. You owe more than $40,000. That's not. And you're in trouble with someone because of it. That's when his eyes snapped to mine so sharply it felt like a slap. A beat of silence, then another, then a third. And then he whispered, actually whispered, What did you see? Before I could answer, he stepped back, not toward the door, toward the window, like he was listening for something outside. That was when the twist hit. It wasn't him I should have been afraid of. It was who he owed. Earlier, while organizing evidence, I'd found a message buried deep in his phone, one he'd deleted but forgotten to clear from the backup. It was months old from an unsaved number. If you don't clear what you owe, I'll collect directly. Don't make me visit her. At first, I didn't know who her meant. I assumed Hannah. But then I noticed something in the thread, a picture. Of me leaving my job. He had sent someone my location, not in the context of cheating, in the context of leverage. And I realized then, he wasn't scamming to fund some flashy lifestyle. He was scamming because he was terrified of whoever he was indebted to. I wasn't just dating a liar or a manipulator. I was dating a man being hunted, and he'd put me on the list. He turned from the window slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was flat, deadened. You shouldn't have gone digging, he said. You have no idea what you just stepped into. But he was wrong. I knew exactly what I'd stepped into. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that I had already planned for this. And the person he feared most, I'd already reached out to them, and they had replied. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt tight, like the air itself was holding still. He kept glancing toward the window, small, jerky movements, the kind someone makes when they're waiting for a shadow to appear. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, watching him finally unravel into the person he really was. Who did you contact? He demanded. I didn't answer. He took a slow step toward me, not threatening, pleading without letting his voice break. You don't understand the kind of person you're dealing with. You think I'm the worst thing that ever happened to you. I'm nothing compared to who? I asked quietly. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted down, then away, like he was weighing the cost of telling me the truth. I waited. I wasn't rushing him. I wanted him to sit in the pressure he'd built with his own hands. Finally, he sank onto my couch like someone had cut his strings. He rubbed his face with both hands, elbows digging into his knees. He didn't look like the man who'd humiliated me at the Whitmore. He didn't look powerful or smug or cruel. He looked cornered. I didn't start out doing this, he said. The money stuff, the dating, it wasn't supposed to be like that. I stayed standing. Then why? His head dropped lower. Because of Ian. I froze. That was the name attached to the unsaved number. The one who'd threatened to collect directly. The one who had a picture of me. My brother, he said. I didn't sit. I didn't react. I just watched him. He kept talking, the confession spilling out in broken, uneven pieces. I owed him money, not loan money, not debt like you think. It was restitution, something he blamed me for, something I didn't do. His voice was shaking now, anger and shame braided tightly together. He went away for a while. When he got out, he wanted everything back that he felt he lost, and he decided I would give it to him. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling like it had answers. I tried to pay him with what I had. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. He wanted leverage. He wanted women, someone he could intimidate, someone he could use, someone I cared about. And his voice cracked just slightly. I gave him your name because I didn't think he'd actually come after you. I thought it was a scare tactic. He always did that kind of thing. The room went silent. My heartbeat didn't speed up. It slowed. Heavy, controlled. Like my body needed to ground itself before the full truth landed. So you hid behind me, I said. My voice was steady, too steady. You weaponized me to protect yourself. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. This wasn't about money, I said. This was survival, yours. At my expense. He finally looked at me then, and the expression on his face was something I had never seen from him, not confidence, not cruelty, not even fear. It was relief. Relief at finally telling the truth, and that was the most disturbing part of all. "That's why I pushed you away," he murmured. "Why I humiliated you last night. If you left on your own, if you hated me, he couldn't use you against me. I needed you gone. I needed you to break up with me, not the other way around." I felt something cold slip down my spine. "So you didn't embarrass me because you hated me." "I embarrassed you," he whispered, "because it was the only way to save you." There it was. The dramatic reason. Not noble, not sweet, not selfless. Just hollow, twisted logic from a man so consumed by his own fear that he convinced himself destruction was protection. I let the weight of it settle. Let him think he'd given me something meaningful. Something that might shift what came next, but nothing he said changed the ending. If anything, it sharpened it, because now I wasn't just dismantling a scam. I was dismantling the man who put a target on my back to save his own skin. I stood there for a long moment after he finished talking, letting the weight of his confession fill the room. He thought he'd earned something with that truth. Absolution, maybe. Understanding, maybe even sympathy. His shoulders loosened just slightly, like he believed we'd crossed some invisible line together. But all he'd done was hand me the final piece I needed. "You think humiliating me was protection?" I asked. My tone was flat, no anger left, no heat. "You think giving my name to a man who threatened me was somehow better than standing up to him yourself?" He didn't answer. He didn't have one. I took my phone from the counter and tapped the screen twice. Not to record. I'd already done that. Our entire conversation, from the moment he walked in, was saved, backed up, and time-stamped. I didn't need more. What I needed was timing, and right on cue there was a sharp knock at my door. His head snapped toward it so fast his neck popped. "Don't open that," he whispered. "I mean it, don't." I didn't move toward the door. I didn't need to. Because the second knock wasn't a threat. It was confirmation. He stared at me, eyes wide, breathing too fast. "What did you do?" I stepped closer to him, close enough that he couldn't avoid my eyes. "You want to know who I contacted?" I said softly. "Not your brother, not the people he owes, the people you owe." He blinked, confused, until realization hit him like a punch. His debts weren't just illegal. They were financial. Multi-front. The women he'd scammed, the ones he'd ghosted, the ones he'd drained, and all of them had names, receipts, screenshots. All of them had been waiting for someone to pull the thread tight. "I told them everything," I said. "Every transfer, every message. Every lie." "That doesn't matter," he snapped, but his voice cracked. "They can't prove anything." "They don't have to," I said. "They just needed each other, and I gave them that." The third knock landed harder. Then a voice. "This is Raleigh PD. Open the door." His entire body went still. "They're not here for me," I said. "They're here for you." Because earlier that morning, after compiling everything, I'd gone to the precinct with a folder thick enough to drop like a brick. Fraud, identity misuse, theft, coercion. And the note from his brother, the threat against me, qualified as something else entirely: extortion. He turned toward me with an expression I'd never seen on him. Not anger, not fear, betrayal. "You set me up." "No," I said. "You set yourself up. I just stopped protecting you." The knocking grew louder. "Police, open the door." I walked toward the entrance. He didn't follow. When I pulled the door open, two officers stood there with the precision of people who already knew the situation inside. I stepped aside. They entered without hesitation. He didn't fight. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just broke quietly, completely, when they cuffed his wrists. As they walked him out, he looked back at me, desperate. "Tell them you misunderstood. Tell them I was trying to protect you." I didn't answer. He didn't deserve a final word. When the door closed and the noise faded, my apartment went still. Silent except for my own breathing, slow, steady, mine again. In the weeks that followed, the women he'd scammed banded together. Statements were filed. Charges multiplied. His brother never came near me, because with law enforcement involved, leverage became risk. The pipeline he built collapsed in on itself, piece by piece. I didn't lose the weight he mocked me for, at least not right away. I didn't need to. I lost something heavier, the version of myself that tolerated him. And when I finally stood in my bathroom weeks later, looking into the mirror, my hair no longer stained with wine, my reflection didn't look broken. It looked awake. He always told me I was too emotional, Too dramatic, too much. He was right about one thing. I was too much for a man who built his life on weakness. And I was the one who ended it.